My apologies for the little delay. I've been trying to go live on my computer and it wasn't working, so I had to hop on my phone really quick. I appreciate your patience and probably give a few minutes for folks to hop on real quick. Thank you very much. Hi, Amanda. So good to see your name here. Twagwalapu askodida chad twagwalapu chillup. Calina Lawrence seeds that sokwab chad tol all chad do sukwab. Nancy Alexis seeds that at seeds koi. Steve Lawrence teeds that at teed bad. Tol all chas do sukwab. Good day to all of you. I'm so grateful to each and every one of you who are joining in. My name is Calina Lawrence. I am Suquamish. I come from the place of the clear salt water. My mother is Nancy Alexis and my father is Steve Lawrence. So I come from the Alexis family on my mother's side. We are Suquamish, Puyallup, and Yakima. And on my father's side, we are Lawrence EY. Our lineage is Suquamish, Duwamish, Port Gamble, Sklallam. And we most likely have a lot of ties and lineage and family throughout Coast Salish territories and beyond, I'm sure. But I personally was born and raised in Suquamish on the Port Madison Indian Reservation, and my parents were also born in Suquamish territory. So it's definitely an honor to come from where I come from and also to be raised in the place of our creation story as Sokwabj people. As Slatlil Chad Alta Yalamu, I currently live in the ancestral village of Yalamu, which is occupied, unceded Ramaytush Ohlone territory. The Ramaytush have been here since time immemorial, and they remain here to this day in the city colonially known as San Francisco, California. I was born and raised in Suquamish and moved down here to San Francisco in 2014. So I've been down here for quite some time, but I, have maintained a strong sense of connection to home and have been able to travel back and forth a lot, even while living out of state. So I just want to honor our protocol and introduce myself, my family's, my lineage, my connection to place and culture, and always acknowledge the guest, the privilege of being a guest in our relatives' territory, and so many things, but I'm just like super excited to be here with everybody today, and constantly in gratitude to the Native Wellness Institute for any time that I'm invited to share space. Usually I'm here sharing music, have the honor of being a contemporary Native musician. And today, I'll be honest, I'll be sharing more about my story. So I won't be sharing any music today, but I'm very grateful to reflect on what it means to be a former foster youth and how my communities between Suquamish and Port Gamble, Sklallam have guided me, and even in ways that we have seen our own systems fail a lot of Indigenous foster youth. It's really important to be grateful and also be critical in a way that can help us move forward and hopefully change the realities of our young people, should they ever have to experience these things. Thank you all for mentioning in the comments where you're coming from. I really love to see how these power hours, week 47, by the way, of NWI's power hours can bring us together from so many different communities. And it just means a lot to me that y'all are just tuning in to kind of hear a little bit about me and my journey. So today's, the title of our power hour today is Foster Care, a young adult's story of healing and adaptation. And so as I introduce who I am, who my families are, where I come from, another important part of my identity is that it literally took 2 villages to raise me. And what a lot of us understand in our Indigenous cultures across Turtle Island is that we've always been communal people, that our families have always stepped in and have taken shifts, right? And it took me a while to understand this, but when I was probably about 19, it finally clicked in my mind that the people who took me in as a foster youth were taking a shift in providing my most basic immediate needs, and also taking that shift in, offering what they could to teach me and guide me and give me space to grow into my own power. So what I want to really emphasize is that there are several people, several families throughout Suquamish and Port Gamble who took some shifts in my life for my parents when my parents did not have the ability to do so. And there are everybody who is a survivor of the foster care system, or everyone who is a foster youth. Our stories are all very unique, very different. It is not, one size fits all. And what I share today, I just really want to emphasize that these are my truths. They are my thoughts and my thought processes that I've gained in my own personal story of healing and adaptation. And I always want to, really be mindful of that, because what might have worked for me might not work for other foster youth, and it might not be the case for them. And so I never want to, speak on behalf of all people with similar realities to mine. And I'll touch a little bit more on that later. But the reason being that my parents are still alive today, which is a blessing. And not only that, they are active in my life today. And I'll share a summary of my story, but it's important for me to emphasize that I have strong relationships with my mother and my father, and we have done a lot of healing, and they have never harmed me, and that is a blessing as well. So when I'm framing some of the things that I talk about, it's important for me to acknowledge, that I'm blessed that my parents have accepted my invitation to heal together, because not all parents do, not all children want that, and not everyone has that capacity. So I really want to recognize that as I share a little bit more with you all today. So thank you to everyone. Adaption. Thank you to you folks for tuning in for Power Hour week number 47. My name is Calina Lawrence once again, and I'll just be sharing a little bit about my story, and then probably emphasizing more on things I've learned, tools I have gained to continue my lifelong healing journey, and also to make sense of, this skill of adaptation that I know I have always had, but has been sharpened through my lived experiences as a foster youth. So those are some of the things we're going to be talking about today. And I just saw, actually, one of my former foster moms just tuned in, Tony Jones. Thank you for being here. This is a beautiful thing I'll be able to speak about too, is that I would say, for the most part, all of my previous foster families are very much present in my life to some degree. And again, for a foster youth, that is very rare. So I want to recognize that my story and what's true for me is unfortunately not the case for a lot of folks. So I want to start. Like, where do we start, y'all? Where do we start? I grew up as the youngest daughter of 7 children. So I have 6 older brothers on my mom's side, and then my dad had 3 other children who are older as well. And I want to say that I was 3 years old when I was systemically removed from the care of my parents and placed in foster care under the Indian Child Welfare Act. And at that age, there was a lot going on. Sometimes I have to be really mindful about what details I share in that aspect. But I will just say that my parents, knowing them now, I understand their lives. They're a glimpse. I understand a glimpse of the traumas that they have endured in their lives as Indigenous people and Indigenous parents. So I've reached a point in my healing journey where I don't blame them, where we have forgiven each other, and we have, gotten deeper into the healing work. But it was not a safe place. My parents were not able to keep me safe. And I recognized that removal from our home was, at the time, the best answer that the folks in our community had at the time. And a lot of parents might say they feel like their children would be better off with somebody else. And I think my parents felt like that. I think my parents thought maybe we would be better off somewhere else. And as a 28-year-old woman now, I would say, I don't think that was the case. I don't think I was better off as a child being systemically separated from my parents and my home. So there's a lot of I'll say balance that is needed to understand the reality of being a foster youth, and especially with my particular story. So from the age of 3 years old until 18, I had lived in around 10 different foster homes throughout Suquamish and Port Gamble, S'Klallam. So within a 15-year period, my family structure, my home structure, my actual physical surroundings changed drastically once a year, every 2 years, every 3 years. And because of this, as we can guess, I was experiencing a lot of abandonment. I don't want to say issues, but abandonment, related behaviors, I guess we could say. I was experiencing trust issues. I'm not sure if issues is the word. It was very difficult for me to trust anyone, especially adults. I experienced, just a lot of sense of belonging and sense of self questions from those ages, 3 to 18. My parents were court-ordered not to see me, and because of that, a lot of the questions I had could not be answered. And this led me, just down a natural journey of, questioning myself in relation to the world, but also, why me? What is so difficult and so hard to love about me that I have to move all the time, that my parents don't want me, right? All these questions that are focused on low self-esteem, rather than me being able to frame them from a perspective of what systemic causes, result in a story like mine and my parents. And so I spent a lot of my childhood self-sabotaging. And self-sabotage for a lot of foster youth looks different, but for me, I was used to constant change. I was used to, having my guard up. I was used to, I guess you might be able to say, drama or chaos. And so when things started to feel too good to be true, I would self-sabotage. And this also looks like a lot of different things, whether it's pushing people away who are getting too close to me, or, finding any excuse for them to, finding any excuse maybe for me to cut them out of my life before they hurt me, or before they let me down, or before they, disappointed me, or just whatever that could have been, because this was the pattern that existed in my life for so long. And so again, like, as we're talking about the lived experiences of foster youth, these are just some things I personally have reflected on and realized over the last 20 years. And they may not be true for everybody, but it's a part of my story that now, being at this point in my healing journey, I can reflect back and I can identify some of those products of being a foster child. So I lived in so many different family structures and different styles of parenting, and this is a blessing. It's also, a difficult reality, because on one hand, a lot of research will show you that children need stability, right? so that we have a safe place to grow and learn about ourselves and learn about the world around us. On the other hand, adaptation is a skill everybody needs, and change is inevitable. And so we also have to figure out a way to embrace that. Well, with foster care, my ability to adapt was forced upon me, meaning that, I had no say and no choice in, where my next home might be, or how long they're going to keep me, or, will I ever get to ask my parents this question or that question? And so the forced adaptation was a messy process. And I often was not in safe spaces to practice that skill. And so this is where autonomy of foster youth, can come in, where I really had to navigate a lot of those teachings on my own. And another word for that or idea might be self-soothing, right? Which a lot of foster youth also have to do. And I, I somehow was able to start to recognize, okay, adaptation is not a bad thing. And I actually, had a phone call this morning where one of our loved ones in our community, Noelle, she was talking about how our families and our ancestors based our lives around our abilities to adapt to change, and how, we've had to really reclaim what that means in our minds. And so for foster youth, change is usually a negative thing unless it is a sense of relief, but there was this unknown that made it difficult. And so forced adaptation is a skill that I'm still learning and still adjusting to, but it's one that, I, as a former foster youth, have chosen to reclaim and honor and use and count as a strength, So we're talking about grief, different levels of grief and trauma and adaptation, self-sabotage, trust, and abandonment. So many of these things that foster youth are all processing all at once, and then also things that we have to navigate and find a way to turn into strengths and call them strengths. Some of the things, I'll probably touch a little bit on as well. While I love, one thing I love about Native Wellness Institute is that we identify the trauma, but we also provide, solution-based and healing-based actions to that as well, right? So as you can imagine, maybe if you're watching today and you are a former foster youth, or you know someone who is, or you've raised foster children, there is a lot of heaviness and heartache and just sadness that is true and real. And at the same time, we are able to identify the community aspect, the well-being, the folks who are offering safety and shelter and clothing and food. We are able to appreciate family dynamics and recognizing our strengths, survival the skills of survival are, to me, like some of the most profound skills that a lot of my peers who are foster youth and my family who are foster youth have. Like, I really want to uplift the skills they have acquired, though they should not have had to acquire them in the way that they did, right? So another thing I think about often is being very careful not to exceptionalize people, not to make someone the exception and hold everyone else to that standard, right? And what I mean by that is, oh, if Calina's a foster youth and she's done this, that, this, and that, then you can too, or you should be able to also, or, that is not fair, because not everybody has the same abilities. And though I might choose to be optimistic and find the strengths in a really difficult reality, it's not fair to project that onto other young people. And I've seen that happen, and that's why also it's important to acknowledge the balance that is needed. We are constantly met with opportunity to choose how we react to a situation, and then also reflect on our ability to make a decision, an informed decision. And I somehow chose to take what was difficult about my life and my reality and my childhood and choose to decide something different than what I witnessed around me. And there were a lot of people who helped encourage that within me, because I lived with so many families. I got to see different types of parenting, some things that worked and other things that maybe weren't as effective. But my foster mom in my last home when I was 15, she really did a beautiful job at teaching me how to make decisions for myself and how to have agency when most other people just told me how it was going to be or made decisions for me. And gaining that sense of agency was such a crucial teaching that I received, because it taught me to trust myself to make decisions. And the reason that I bring her up, her name is Marjorie, and a lot of folks probably know her from Suquamish, from Tulalip in Suquamish. She was my foster mom at a crucial time in my teenage years, where I was able to take my low self-esteem or question of belonging and transform that into trust and healing and forgiveness. And I know I'm kind of rambling, I'm jumping around a little bit here, but one thing that she taught me was, what narrative did I want to see my story told from? And here's how she did that. She, was sitting me down. I was about to turn 18. And when we age out, a lot of different things happen to foster youth when they turn 18. But, she was her family was a family that said, stay here as long as you need to until you get on your feet or get your own place. A lot of foster youth, soon as they're 18, they're out on the street with nothing and no one, and all of this trauma and little to no resources to navigate or life skills to, start somewhere. Not everyone, but most. And so for me to have a foster family that said, we are your forever home whenever you need us, our doors are always open. She said, when you turn 18, the choice is yours. The restraining orders on my parents will be lifted. I'll be an adult. I can make decisions on how I want them to be in my life. So she said, if you turn 18 and you decide you love your parents, but you're not interested in having an adult relationship with them, that's fine. That's your choice. If you turn 18 and you decide you want to get to know your parents and you would like to start a healthy adult relationship with them, you can do that too. And she just presented me 2 possible scenarios, right? And that at that moment, I was like, I really do have some control over the narrative of this story. What story do I want to have? What story do I want to tell for the rest of my life? Do I want to tell the story of Calina being raised in foster care for 15 years? She chooses not to know her parents, even though they live right down the road, even though her friends have lost parents that they can never see again. She made a choice not to know her parents, and that's the route that she wants to go. Or do I want to tell a story that says Calina was raised in foster care for 15 years. Her parents were not a part of her life, but when she turned 18, she reached out and just started with a conversation. I don't even know what you talk about, but you just are together and you start somewhere. And you decide to listen. The part of the story where you say, you go on to hear from your parents, to learn about their lives, to maybe try to understand, why it was difficult for them, or what they've been through. What was their relationship with their parents like? What was this status of the country? How were Indigenous people being treated? Like, my mind started to go with this story about forgiving my parents and learning about them, right? Seeing where it could go to have my parents in my life after all this time, right? And all it took was for one of my foster parents to say, this is your choice, and here are some alternative narratives that the story could go, right? And my mind took it and I went with it. I said, no, I want the story. I want to tell the story. I want to change the story to say, Calina turned 18. She reached out to her parents. They accepted her invitation to, start to heal together. Now 10 years later, holy, I'm 28. 10 years later, my parents are integral parts of my daily life. We talk on the phone almost every day. They're still not perfect. They still have healing to do, but we're doing it together. And that story sounds so much better to me than if I were to say, there's no reason to have them in my life. And again, this is a different reality for everyone. If folks do not feel safe with their parents, we cannot force this on them. We cannot project or dismiss or control their healing journey. We can only offer, our ideas, our love. We can say, hey, like, I have a friend, this is how she went about it, if that feels like it resonates with you, versus, oh, if Calina can forgive her parents, why can't you? There's a difference in how we present that to people who are on their own journeys with their own abilities. And I share this again with you all because as an artist, I realize and love the act of creating and imagining and reimagining and challenging myself to exercise my mind. And I will say 100% that every foster youth out there is the same way. That I can definitely state, that we are problem solvers and we have skills in problem solving and contextualizing. We also have the information to show where things might not be working, or where the ball was dropped, or where we slipped through a certain crack, or, someone had too much power over the direction that our story was going. So I just, I share this example with you to identify, like, just again, that one sentence that my foster mom shared with me. I was 17. It could go this way, it could go that way. You have the choice. And whatever you choose, trust yourself in that, right? Thank you all for commenting, by the way. I wish I could read them all and reply to all of you. Each of you have just so much insight and so much value to this conversation and this topic. And I really, I really hope and pray that there are folks who are nurturing and uplifting the insight that you have. For me, it's just been, especially this past year, just a lot of reflection and understanding the different levels of how we got to this point within our family dynamics. So another thing besides narrative that I think is important is not just a foster youth focus, but like a focus for all of our young people. How are we establishing a sense of belonging, a sense of self, a sense of purpose in our young people, and recognizing when certain things are when certain things are not present in someone's life, such as stable shelter, food, clothing, water. When those things are removed from somebody's reality, that is a devastating transition for most adults. And here we have so many young people experiencing these types of instability, which is really difficult. And I would say I was probably 18 or 19 when I started realizing that foster care is more of a systemic issue than it is a personal issue, right? It's so much easier to say that parent couldn't do this or couldn't do that they were supposed to do, than it is to recognize how our society is structured to leave or guide people in a direction where they lose their ability to provide for their children. And this was another vital part of my healing journey, to stop wondering, why was I not worthy of X, Y, and Z, versus this is not about me. This is 500 centuries of colonialism attacking the structure of indigenous families for assimilation and theft of land. Again, it can take some time to navigate your self-worth while recognizing there's been so many tactics used against us for so long, and you unfortunately are a victim of those tactics. And this opened my heart and my mind in so many ways to, hear my parents out, hear my family out, and remove my desire for answers to questions I might not ever get. For a long time I was caught up on all these questions, and it wasn't until I started changing what questions I was asking, or releasing the need for certain answers and understanding they will come to me when I'm ready for them, and they will come to me when the people with them are willing to share them. And in this case, that was my parents. So the narrative of the story, what do I want the story to be? This was a tool that I used and still use every day to process, to heal, to then, okay, if I can see what I want, what direction I want my story to go, then I can figure out what it's going to take to get to that reality. And then not necessarily placing blame on settler colonialism, although settler colonialism is to blame for a lot of it. Just recognizing the role that it plays to create a society where children are severely abandoned. It's tough. It's a really tough place to sit and see how our world has let it get to this point where we have children disconnected and separated from their creators, the people who brought them into this world. So I'm still reading some of your comments as I go. And I thank y'all so very much for listening to me just kind of briefly touch on the depth of this topic. We have about 12 minutes left together. Again, this is week 47 of Native Wellness Institute's Power Hours, and my name is Calina. I'm Suquamish, and I'm a survivor of the foster care system for 15 years between Suquamish and Port Gamble S'Klallam. I was raised by over 10 different families in my communities, and some of them are tuned in today, and I'm I super love all of them. All of you who are here, who, while a lot of my conversation has been focused on my personal, dynamics with my parents, there's a whole nother aspect to this truth, which is the strain that it puts on the families who are taking in our youth. And, the folks who are opening their homes and welcoming us, knowing, fully knowing that we have some trauma to unpack. And so yesterday was my 28th birthday, and every foster family or foster parent that I lived with throughout my life, messaged me or called me or came to my birthday party on Zoom. And I really had this moment where I broke down thinking like, wow, what a blessing, to have these relationships, these continued relationships with folks. Again, this is not the case for every foster youth. A lot of different families have their own agendas, and statistically, a lot of children face more trauma and more abuse in foster homes than they do prior to being removed. This is another really difficult reality that is true. But I just feel super protected and blessed to say that the families that I was placed with genuinely offered me everything they could, even when I was self-sabotaging, right? Because I was doing that for a while. I still catch myself like having to self-talk my way through a lot of the thoughts that I'm just like conditioned to have. And this is why I say like I'll forever be on this journey, because every situation is a choice to reclaim my reaction and the way I look at a situation, and the way it'll determine the direction that my story is going. So there are several parents, foster siblings, who I just could never thank enough. And my parents, my birth parents, also love them. They all love each other. A lot of times within and outside of Indian country, there's such a animosity and a lot of dynamics And that's for reasons, you know, I don't want to dismiss people's anger. When you put children in harm's way, we have a right to be angry about that. But what's happening in a lot of communities now is that rather than continuing on this further separation, how can we uplift folks to keep their families together and prevent a lot of the trauma that occurs? And so the direction of, foster care is also one that we can practice our storytelling skills with, right? We can get creative and we can decide when a family is struggling, when parents are struggling and their children are suffering from that, what is the best way to meet all of their needs? That is not the traumatizing separation that is happening, that most of the time is not immediately needed. I had this thought the other day, as someone who moved around to so many different homes, I had a question in my mind. What if, if something traumatic happens, say a child's parent passes away and they have nowhere to go. What if there are foster parents who can move into their house? Like a foster parent can go to their house so they can keep their room and they can keep, what they know is familiar until they transition to something different, right? Like, what if there was a level of, or a branch of foster care where parents go to the kids versus kids being removed and sent somewhere else or moved somewhere else? Like, it's just a question, right? Like, it's an idea that is different, that could have a different outcome, could have a less traumatizing outcome. And of course, that doesn't work for every situation, right? But that was just something I was thinking about, because we also can't be afraid to, just get creative and trust our minds, and also take the input of folks who have the lived experiences. We've got 5 more minutes left, and I have thrown all types of stuff at y'all, jumping around all over the place on these little tangents that my mind usually goes on when I'm talking. But, one thing that my friend Shailene, who drew the artwork for the shirt, always says is, there are, oh my gosh, I'm going to mess this up, right? Like, the trauma doesn't excuse the behavior, but it explains the behavior, right? And what our generation is doing right now is we're healing from a lot of stuff. And one way to heal is to acknowledge what needs to be healed. And again, this is pretty much the definition of my life. Like, this is what I've really gained in reflection. Contextualizing my survival, my family's stories of survival, systemic failures that cause these cycles to repeat, and all while realizing and knowing in our minds and our bodies that Indigenous people are master adapters. Inherently, we know how to adapt. We have always known how to adapt, and we've also always known that change is inevitable. So we prepare our families, we prepare our land, we prepare our children and our animal relatives to embrace change when it comes. And so when I chose to say I am a foster child, a foster youth, a young adult who experienced the foster care system, I also say, and I am really good at adapting. how can I apply this skill of mine to every instance in my life that doesn't even just have to be negative, right? But how can I tap into my skills that I've learned and transform them into helpful tools whenever anything happens? And this is, again, this is a trait that I have chosen to embrace about myself, is that I can recognize a difficult truth, and I can also get creative about the way I'm looking at that truth and the role it's going to play in my life, the decisions I'm going to make based off of those truths, right? So this is just like a little glimpse into the way that my brain works on a daily basis. But what I really want to ask of everyone who's here with us in our last minute, the same way that we as Indigenous people are asking for us to be represented and included and thought of in every space that exists, please do the same for foster youth and foster children, because there are a lot of spaces I've been in who don't consider who might be foster youth in this room, and how are my plans affecting them, realizing how much is on their plate at any given time, and having patience and compassion. So those are just a few things I guess we covered in an hour. This is week 47 of Native Wellness Institute Power Hour. My name is Calina, and I really appreciate all of you for just listening, for commenting. I know afterwards I'm going to go back through and read everyone's comments. But if you're a foster youth, a survivor here today, we love you. We are so, so grateful for you. You are worthy. You are brilliant. You are capable. And NWI is just one group of folks who believe that with our whole hearts. But the most important thing is that you believe it yourself. So, yes, if there's any way I can ever be here to support you, any of the resources I have gained, I offer them to you in any way that I can. I want your story to go how you want your story to go. And I know you are able to write it that way. Thank you all so much. Also, thank you to my sister Siobhan. She hopped on. She's one of those foster siblings who also took me in when her parents took me in, right? So shout outs to foster siblings out there. My foster mom, Tony, thank you very much for being here and listening and loving me, and encouraging me. Shabitsi, Chud, Natasha, I love you. Thank you for hopping on. Thank you all so much. Faith, hi. Thank you very much for listening. I'm just reading like, oh, I didn't even know y'all were here. This is the community that helped raise me, put up with all my seasons, I call them. Y'all see me through some seasons. So thank you for being with me through my seasons, and stepping in and taking those shifts for my parents. It's really important for me to acknowledge that my parents picked it back up. They're back on their shift. They've been on their shift for 10 years now. So I love them. I would not change I mean, yeah, I wouldn't change any of it, but I also recognize most people should not have to go through what I've been through to acquire the skills that I've acquired. So we'll think about that as we raise our young babies up and we heal the hearts of those who have already been hurt. All right, I'm about to get off. I'm 3 minutes over, but I love you guys. Definitely tune in. NWI Power Hours every single day, 12 to 1, Monday through Friday. Lots of good folks. All right. Hoi.